Hi everybody, my name is Tony Neighbors. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with the Everett Housing Authority, and I wish you all a happy and safe Pride Month. Pride began with events at Stonewall Inn in New York in 1969, June 1969. And I know sometimes when we talk about celebrations, we might say, oh yeah, I had a riot, it was a great time. But what's interesting that a lot of people don't realize is that the first Pride was literally a riot for LGBTQ rights and justice in response to police violence. And it was kicked off primarily with Black and brown trans women, including Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. So it's important to realize that what happened at Stonewall was really a watershed moment in history that has kicked off and inspired the modern day movement for LGBTQ rights. Pride's about celebrating the impact of LGBTQ plus people, and definitely about continuing to support movements towards the rights of LGBTQ folks. So to LGBTQ plus staff members, participants in our housing programs, friends, family members, and community, please know that we see you and we honor you. We honor your right to equitable treatment and access to thriving, respect, and dignity. We celebrate your stories, your victories, and the continued advancement of your human rights. We also recognize that there's still a whole lot more work to be done, both in society as well as in our collective hearts and beliefs. And in that spirit, I am going to share 6 ways that I want to invite my fellow cisgender heterosexual friends to more fully advocate on behalf of our LGBTQ plus friends. So 6 ways to be a better ally. Number 1, learn and understand the adversity that LGBTQ plus people face. And I'll pause for a moment to give a trigger warning for folks. I'm going to share some stats that really speak to this. And so for anyone that might be sensitive to some of this information, feel free to skip ahead a little bit. But a few examples of this. LGBTQ people are nearly 4 times more likely than non-LGBTQ people to be victims of violent crime. Another statistic to know about is that LGBTQ people are estimated to comprise about 4.5% of the US population. Yet according to a recent report released by the FBI, they comprise nearly 20%. 18.5, I believe, is the exact percentage of all hate crime victims. And then another stat, the US prison population has twice the number of LGBTQ individuals as the non-incarcerated population. So that's 8% incarcerated versus 4% as a share of the total population. And so definitely suggests that LGBTQ people are overrepresented in jails and prisons, and this number is even higher for those in juvenile detention, which is up to around 20%. So they're really painful, difficult, challenging numbers and statistics. And this is just a few. There are a lot of other examples of statistics and data that shows the adversity that LGBTQ plus people go through. And it's important for us as allies and advocates to educate ourselves in understanding what those things are and what the issues are that impact people. Number 2, center and magnify LGBTQ plus voices, both in terms of our own rhythms of life, our own rhythms of entertainment, or rhythms of social media and news and whatever the case may be. And I actually want to take this time to shout out my friend Kim and her wife Shaquinta, who recently launched a YouTube show that's called The Sweet Spot. That is fantastic. I'll drop a link to that here. And I also will include a link that has a whole bunch of different people in social media that I think are great to follow, just to continue to broaden our own exposure to different voices and to hear those things, and then also to be able to support and uplift those in our spheres of influence. I say also read books, watch movies, just as many ways as we're able to hear voices and hear stories. That just really helps us to be able to grow in our empathy and to learn what it is that our part is in ways that we are complicit in these issues, in ways that we can actually be helpful to reverse these things. Entertainment can be very, very powerful. Moonlight, for example, and talking about movies, that was a very just beautiful film for me that captured one specific story that can exist in these communities. 3, give to LGBTQ plus serving organizations. So even if you might currently lack relationships with LGBTQ plus people, or maybe you feel like you're a beginner to the journey or to the conversation, even if that's the case, I still recommend that you seek out organizations that are already engaged with this work and find ways to financially support them. And I'll drop some examples of what that could look like in the description as well. 4, learn and use correct terminology and pronouns, please. and honor and respect the ways that people communicate that they want to be referred as. So it might be she, her, it might be he, him, it might be they, them. It might be all sorts of other phrases that people identify with. And I saw a data point that showed that children, again, this goes back all the way to juveniles and children and teenagers, were up to 50% less likely to commit suicide if they're a trans child and their pronouns are being respected. So these things really do matter, and they really do impact people who would otherwise be marginalized by us not respecting and understanding the ways that they identify. And so a couple of points that I want to add to that is I want to encourage us to just embrace the discomfort that inevitably comes when you have to more or less retrain or rewire the ways that your thoughts are accustomed to categorizing or viewing or understanding people. It requires a little extra thought, it requires a little extra effort, but I want us to just embrace that discomfort because of the possible positive impacts that come when we choose to dive in that way. And also too, it might feel inconvenient to do this. This is true, it might feel inconvenient. It might feel inconvenient even if people want you to share your own pronouns as well, even if that's not something that's a primary way that you identify or think of yourself. But again, I think it's such a small price to pay in order to better honor someone else's humanity and each other's humanity, and to uplift each other and to uplift marginalized voices. Number 5, speak up. Speak up when homophobic or transphobic comments or jokes are made in your presence. And I say do this whether there are LGBTQ plus people in the room or not. Do not choose silence. I would say that the roots of these types of comments usually are based off of what's actually going on in people's hearts or minds or belief systems. And when we act on things that are buried in our subconscious that we don't address or challenge, it often then can translate out to these bigger systems and these bigger ways that, again, marginalization continues to show up and negatively impact LGBTQ plus people in much more harsh ways than other people in society. So I think another thing too is I've heard this in social circles lately, that people will say that silence is violence. And sometimes when harm is being done, we think that there is a neutral option to just not say anything, and that we're more or less having nothing to do with it, not impacting it. But I think that when we witness something that is harmful and we don't say anything, we don't stand up, then we are complicit, and we are still upholding the status quo, which is harmful. So let's just bear that in mind and take that challenge graciously and gracefully. And then number 6, use your spheres of influence to advocate for institutional and systemic change. So there are so many ways, again, I just shared a few stats and data, but so many ways that LGBTQ plus people just don't have equal access to thriving in society, and so many ways that practices, policies, people, laws still make it more difficult for LGBTQ plus people to live happy, healthy, and whole lives. So let's speak up. Let's use whatever our platforms might be, whatever our areas of influence or power might be, to advocate for real change. So I hope some of these ideas are helpful, even if they might be slightly challenging, even if they might cause us to have to think about some new ways of being or some new ways of speaking, but really just for the purposes and the sakes of uplifting each other as people, seeing the humanity in all people, and just being willing to step it up and stand up for what is right. And this is certainly in line with our agency commitments to thriving in communities and to justice and all these sorts of things. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And once again, I wish you a happy and safe Pride.